So, first of all, I want to say that Circles is not an ID. It's the web of trust around it is a sort of a side effect of the UBI protocol. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Julio. I am an economic anthropologist, currently serving as public outreach for the Basic Income Earth Network, and I'm also one of the co-founders of the Circles cooperative that runs on the Circles system. And I'm very happy, have to say, to be here because this is the first time in like the 5 years I've been working on Circles or more that the two worlds that I'm part of come together. So the BN world, the basic income world, and the crypto Web3 space. So it's a very special moment personally for me, and I hope also for you too. So yeah, I wanted to first of all explain that Circles is a basic income system for communities. So the way it works is that, well, maybe I can just have a show of hands. Who here has a Circles account? All right, that's pretty good. So you probably know that when you enter Circles, you issue your own personal currency. So you all have a ERC20 token that gets issued or minted at the same rate. So the idea is that by having this initial baseline protocol, you can have many things on top. But I think what's really interesting and also radical about the design of Circles is that it provides people with the power to issue money, which is today, as you probably all know, a power that is kept within central banks and private banks. So yeah, one of the things I want to explore in this talk is what happens when people take the power from the state to issue money, what becomes possible. And within that, I titled my talk, Credit versus Commodity Money. So I want to make a bit of a practical and theoretical distinction between these two forms of money so that we can think how could they be better interacting in the future. So first, I want to maybe ignite a bit the imagination and talk a bit about how basic income is really about recovering our lost freedoms. And for that, I want to invoke the presence of my academic advisor and friend who recently passed, David Graeber. He wrote two very important books that I think together with when thinking about basic income. The last one, The Dawn of Everything, is basically a history of humanity, of prehistory and of history. So it's a revisionist history in the sense that it challenges the notion that human beings went from hunter-gatherers to discovering agriculture and then falling from Eden, so to say, by discovering private property, eventually the Industrial Revolution, and then the present. So a challenge to that linear view of history, that telos of history, is presented in the book by showing how many different societies across the planet have had many social structures and political imaginations about how they want to and can organize themselves. The book is also a revisit to what the state actually is, or how to think about the state in a new way. So instead of thinking of the state simply as having the sort of monopoly over violence, they do basically run through all this history to say that the state, as we know it today, the nation state is actually a combination of three distinct different principles of sovereignty, politics, and administration that come together as regimes of domination that in a way got us stuck in the social form that we're now on. So the book is also, in a way, a challenge to our imagination to look also at the freedoms that we've had around history. So one of them is the freedom to disobey or to say no, which is a freedom that basic income gives us access to. As you heard from the previous talks, when people have a basic income, they can decide whether or not to enter into forced labor. They can decide what types of relationships they want to have with each other. So maybe they want to say no to a boss, to a family member, or whoever. Another freedom, and I think it's important to invoke it here, especially because we're dealing with systems that are global in scope, but also hyper-local, is the freedom to move away and be taken care of. So if we are serious about making basic income into being, imagine having a basic income here and in Berlin, and then being able to go where you have a community of people and also have a basic income there. Today, the borders of Europe and the borders of the world make it almost impossible for people to actually cross borders. And so in a way, a basic income is also a plea to the anarchist idea of borderlessness. So the freedom to move away. And also lastly, the freedom to transform our social relations fundamentally. So concepts that we have today, such as the household, or the divisions between the household, the private sector, and the public sector, all these things would shift as the relationship of the wage worker and the house worker would cease to exist, as everyone would then have the ability to say no to forced wage labor. So if we go a step forward and think about what would happen if we actually were to abolish wage labor, what sort of societies could we create? What are the social forms that are enabled? And bringing it back to blockchain technology, what are the infrastructures that are needed to make those values happen? Then the second book is an earlier book. It's called Debt, The First 5,000 Years. You might have read it. And I want to take this book a bit to explore the differences between what is normally called credit money and commodity money. So in very simple terms, you can think about credit money systems as systems that are based on promises or promissory systems. So an IOU. There's an I, there is something that is owed, there is a debt involved, and there is a U. So it's a two-sided relationship. There's an asset and there's a liability. And the value in credit money systems is coming from people directly, from the actions that they take. Of course, also the monetary systems in credit money are not fixed. There is not a limited supply of credit. It can be expanded or contracted depending on need. I think that's an important design principle that we have to take into account. And of course, examples of that are circles, trust lines. We'll have our friend here, Andreas, talking about trust lines later, and also the Asian mutual credit traditions, but also largely market economies that have existed on credit networks throughout history in the Middle East, in the Americas, in China, credit networks where people would trust each other across many different places and settle debts, do trade of many sorts. So this is the type of, it's a very powerful thing, especially now with things like Circles, where you can actually issue money into being from a peer-to-peer perspective and have more horizontal relationships with each other. Now, I want to contrast credit money to commodity money, which is in the space that we're in, what you will call a digital asset or a token. So examples of that are gold or Bitcoin, Ether, etc. But I think one of the fundamental things that make a commodity money a commodity is that it is one-sided, right? You either have the asset or you don't have it. And this asset has a price because it's sold in a market. So the idea of commodity money is that the value of the money comes from the object itself. So the philosophy of money is very different than the credit one. Right, in the credit money system, the value comes from people, whereas in the commodity money system, the value comes from the object. There is a fetishization of an object that we give power to, and then the object has power over us. And also largely, because of these dynamics, the limited supply of it also creates this type of scarcity or scarcity that makes the price of it go up or down. Now, if I had to take a long historical sweep and contrasting these two systems, of course, the historical reality is quite messy. You have always these two types of money systems overlapping and being in time with each other. So one thing that is important to say is that today, after the unpegging of the dollar from gold that happened in the 70s with the Nixon administration in the US, we entered a credit money era, which is still what we're under or living in. So it is very interesting to, in that context, situate the crypto space, which is largely founded upon a commodity idea of money. right? And so what happens if we take the tools from blockchain and apply a credit imagination? Now, so bringing history into the present, I want to contextualize again and ask the question of what are the stakes today? We live in the context of war, imperialist wars, climate change, energy crisis, especially here in Europe, rising economic inequality, and the mass extinction of life. That's just the reality. And so based on that reality, what are the strategies and tactics that we can take to make basic income happen and maybe even abort some of these crises in a meaningful way? And one question that is always in my mind when trying to make basic income happen through Circles is something that I like to call the transformation problem. So today you hear a lot about how do we have a just transition? How do we transition into other systems? And the imaginations are degrowth, post-growth, green growth, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, there's always this question of how do we actually transform the political economy into another? You know? For the purposes of my work, my question is how do we practically move the economy that we have today to a basic income economy? And one analogy that I like to use in this is the sun. So you can think about monetary systems as creating gravity around them, circulating objects, circulating resources, circulating relationships. You can think about the dollar as a type of huge gravitational pull. Things like Bitcoin, Ether are as well. But for me, when I'm thinking about creating a basic income economy, I'm thinking, how can we harness the energy that is needed to actually transform the social relations, the reality around us, so that we can actually bring basic income into being? So how do we actually transition there? What are the steps that are needed to get there, materially and symbolically? So this is Circles. We have many plural instances of Circles. I think there is a strength in having plurality. We have 3 different instances so far, and hopefully more coming soon. We have the Circles Garden with the co-op and the Bits Process Collective, who are here present. I'm also part of. We have Circles Land with Samuel and Daniel, who will talk to you later about the project. And we also have the Expedition Grundine Common, or Circles Pink, as it was called, with Johannes Ponader. And so, yes, I think there is a power in creating different instances of the same system, in the sense that every reality is different. So what we show people also has to be adapted to that local reality, right? Like, I don't expect that the front end that is used in one side of the world will adapt to another. So there is a power in having these plural applications. And blockchain allows for that. So here's just a picture of the marketplace. You can join today if you're on Circles. Just go to market.joincircles.net. You can also buy some things in the corner, as you probably saw. There are many things you can get, from massages to locally grown food in Brandenburg, and many, many other things. We run assemblies every month in Berlin, so that we can get the community together to talk about the different partners, how do we want to organize distribution, what is the problems of food in Germany, et cetera, so that we can think about concrete steps into changing those supply chains and changing those sorts of productions with Circles. So we try to open a space to have it more democratic. Through the pandemic, we had to do them online, but we also do them in person. And so, yeah, it's a very organic community, and it's really nice how it's slowly developing alongside also the technology. Now, here's a picture of what an economy could look like. On the left side, you have the credit network, the economic network, with a few nodes concentrated on it. On the right side, you have the web of trust. So when you trust people in Circles, you're in a way sharing the power to issue money. And so this, as a researcher, for me, is interesting because you can analyze the types of cyclical relationships that go on in an economy almost organically. Economies also, have to remember, are fundamentally human economies. Economies are not about the objects that we exchange, but about the people that make them. And so in that sense, as trust gets built and as interrelations happen, things emerge. And as people start to trade with each other, you start to create linkages across the supply chains. and things slowly become stronger. So just to give you a bit of an overview about the Circles open pilot, I call it an open pilot because I would like to move to a point where we don't think as pilots as something that eventually end, but something that we can move into politics or into policy. So it's open-ended because Circles is an open system. So we have to take tools, make tools and methodologies that adapt to that, to the messiness of reality. So in the pilot in Berlin, we have about 1,000 people, over 120,000 accounts open worldwide. The way we run the model for the pilot is that you have a subsidy model where the businesses that we onboard into the network get a promise from the co-op that they will receive euros for the circles that they accept, so that they bear less risk. And so in building that economy, the idea is that over time, the exchange rate that the businesses do lowers so that they can trade circles with each other. As I said before, the model of monetary issuance is based on a peer-to-peer model. So there is this peer-to-peer issuance of money, or a bottom-up monetary creation process. And it's, of course, powered by trust. When I trust someone, it means that I'm willing to accept your promises for the stuff that I'm giving. Right? That's what trust means in the Circle system. And it is self-organized by the cooperative and the community. And today, you receive 1 circle every hour, or about 720 circles a month. And so this is how we're running the pilot. You can ask me questions about it later. But we took this idea or model from also the Gyeonggi system in South Korea that we mentioned earlier. But I wanna take a closer look into this transformation problem that I mentioned before, and these contradictions, right? So at the beginning, when you have a system that is based on promises, the fungibility of the system is quite low, because not everyone will accept your funny money for stuff that they produce, right? So there is a process that has to go through where you actually build enough trust and you have enough resources available in the credit network so that it can actually be useful for the people that use Circles. So the state money promises that we give to merchants from the co-op helps us build a stronger merchant circle or a business-to-business sector. It also increases the fungibility. So we have seen that. We have seen how we are effectively growing. But in general, there is the sort of big elephant in the room, if you want, that is that businesses always need access to capital beyond whatever credit network that they have, either to expand their production or to move to another place or to do whatever it is that their business demands them to do. So in that sense, thinking back to this idea of credit versus commodity money, we have effectively a credit money system running in the city. And now my question, and it's also a question for you, thinking within the space that we're in, with the power that digital assets have, what is the proper role of commodity money in the context of UBI? You've seen also Proof of Humanity speak before. That is an example of a commodity money system, but also as it happened in Kenya, where sometimes the funds were not there. What happens when you are dependent on a system whose value is constantly fluctuating, right? So that's a different approach to what we're doing. But at the same time, there is a power on that, because if there are funds, if there are enough digital assets with enough value on them, you can eventually turn that into state money. So how do we actually embed the economy with things like Circles so that we can actually transition to a basic income economy? I'll skip this. So our answer so far in Circles is to make what we call group currencies or community currencies. So how to move beyond peer-to-peer credit network to what we call these group currencies that could be backed by DAI or stablecoin or any other digital asset, so that you can have an elegant separation between the credit network and the commodity token, so to say. This is something we're exploring. We have, I think, Alex in the room who wrote the code for the group currency contracts. But essentially, this could be a way where we can leverage the power of digital assets with credit networks, such as Circles, and then actually embed the economy within supply chains from distribution, food, care work, and anything else that you can imagine. So I'll stop there with the last rumination that I have. So before, the web of trust that I showed you is essentially public. We think this is a problem, mainly because, as we were saying before, these are people's money, these are people's transactions, and if you're serious about creating a system that is unconditional, we have to ensure that no one can nudge the system, that people can spend as freely as they do with cash. And in that, I'm very grateful because Berlin is a very cash-friendly city. As you all know, there is a war on cash going on in the world at the moment, not just in Europe, also in places like India, Latin America, and so on. So how could we bring about a privacy-preserving monetary system, an anonymous monetary system, on the digital realm that can also coexist with cash, but that has the same properties of cash, that is privacy-preserving, and you cannot basically nudge people. So that is my last rumination. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to hear your questions.
Certainly a very aspirational structure. If we have questions, we do.
Hi. The previous presentation was about proof of humanity and Sybil resistance. I know this is based on recommendations, but it basically helps the system against an attack from a single person and assumes everybody else is honest. But if you need, say, 3 recommendations, then if 3 people collude, they can Sybil the system, Sybil attack it. Do you use something like proof of humanity, or do you plan to use something like proof of humanity?
I think, so Andre, what I know, I'm not familiar so much with the politics inside Proof of Humanity, but I do know that Clement and the people from Proof of Humanity want to use a group currency in Circles so that they can have a similar mechanism like the DRIP used to work. So we're definitely in contact thinking about how to integrate these things together. No? Like, as I was saying, we need to bridge this gap in the crypto space between the hegemonic commodity assets, digital assets, and these credit networks that are also very powerful, but don't get as much attention as they should. So I'm definitely open for collaborations. We definitely are, but it's the question of how do you design those systems so that they can serve the community as well.
I also have another question about the intrinsic value, like the price itself. You mentioned stable coins. Those have very complex mechanisms that themselves have not yet been proven. We've seen a lot of try and fail, but they're all kind of architected to be pegged to fiat or certain complex rebasing mechanisms. And so what is the... It looks like there is a token, we're minting it and we're distributing it to people and we just decide to ascribe value to it, but like where does the value come from? Like, are we trying to replace fiat?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think fundamentally, like credit money systems are, because they're based on promises, they're social agreements. They are social relations that we decide upon. So in Circles right now in Berlin, the 720 Circles people get is equivalent to 72 euros. But that can change, and that can be agreed upon and changed upon. No? And that's perhaps like a governance question. But in general, the question here is fundamentally different. It's just a unit to exchange, to settle debts. It is not, as I said, something that has intrinsic value in it. That's commodity money. You know? It's a different, not just a philosophy of money, but also a different design of money, right? So.
Yeah, I work on Circles, and I just wanted to clarify that being free people, you cannot actually create an attack on the system. You can create an account if you are verified by free people, but the UBI that will be issued on your accounts can't be used unless you have like valuable trusted connections. So you cannot use your UBI outside your trust network. So if you're just a trust network free or whatever, you can't use them outside that network. If that helps.
Yeah, there's like if you want like intrinsic self-defense mechanism in the system. So if you trust someone who's making a fake account, you are the only one that gets affected, because those tokens can only circulate as long as they are trusted. Right? So that's in itself, the web of trust provides that security. Can you?
So it's not entirely fungible. Like there are circles within circles. Like not all circles are equal. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean all circles are equal, but the trust relations that people have are fundamentally different, right? Like the web of trust is just a reflection of people's social relations, which are with other people, and everyone is a different person, so everyone has a different series of relationships. You know, the system is just meant to express that creditness. Let's say that the belief. Credit comes from the word for credo, which means belief. So you know there is a belief that these tokens can be exchanged for what I promised to give for them, right? So it's a fundamentally different system than a digital asset, where the value of it comes from the price that it has in the market in a specific point in time, right? And yeah, the point of my presentation is what is a good way to balance these two types of monies together.
My scenario is like...
There's another question?
I just had kind of a continuation to his question, which is like, okay, so let's say I create 4 accounts, right? And then one of those accounts is my legit account. And the other 3 are civil accounts. And then my legit account has connections to you, for example, right? Are all circles equal in the sense that like once my other 3 accounts feed the legit account and it has a connection to you, I can now pay you with my circles which you trust?
Only the legit ones.
So there's still a differentiation between everybody's circles are like different circles. Like my circles would have like my account ID on them.
Yeah, every person's circles are different. So every account has its own unique ERC20 token. So that's why I only accept the circles of people who I trust directly.
Once they get to you, they're still labeled with those people's names?
With their public key, yes. Like they're...
Okay, thanks.
So, for example, in my case, I have the circles of 136 people.
So when you send them to somebody else, you would be sending them, and those people would also have to trust every different 136.
They only accept circles of the people they trust. So there is a rippling effect. So Chris is going to talk about this later, but there is a good analogy to think about. This is the 6 degrees of separation. I think in the Circles network it's actually 5, but you can basically get to anyone else in the network. Say I want to pay the Pope because he believes in basic income and I want to give him a tribute or whatever. I can pay him because I know Joy and I trust Joy and Joy trusts me and Joy knows Sarath and Sarath knows the Pope and I can pay the Pope. So it's you can also call it a rippling credit network because the token sort of gets swapped around or rippled around depending on the trust relations.
But they each remain with their own independent ID from where they originated from?
Yes.
That's a very valid algorithmic question because the title of the presentation was civil attacks, and civil attacks are characterized by a certain amount of swarm of insects attacking, like 51% attack. So I get that 3 people would not, but that's a valid school of thought in that I only have to put in the work to authenticate my one legit self, and then I can have 5 or 6 fake accounts, and then all my fake accounts can validate my legit plus fake accounts.
Yeah.
And if that can be automated via an MEV bot or front run in some way, then you can Sybil attack the system, right? But I guess that's also... This is like, it's like a Schrodinger's cat. Like, it's not something you can...
The thing is, well, the first is a question of what for, but I think you can do that. It happened to us actually. Like we had a lot of like fake accounts coming from China and other places at some point. Like the accounts, like the safes that were deployed just went like this.
Correct. Yeah.
And we were like, what's going on?
Yeah, this is weird.
But it doesn't affect the people in other communities around the world as long as they don't trust those accounts, right? So there is this inherent like boundary that is made through the trust connections.
I guess there's also an inherent naivete in universal basic income when you want to believe that people are nice, because that's how you prep for a Sybil attack. Like you prep the system by having lots and lots and lots of fake accounts before you get to your, like maybe you just want to earn an extra income at the side or whatever, but I think there's a lot of trust, like you said, with the word credo. So
yeah, it's a system based on trust, no? Like
trust, right.
it's a promissory system.
Yeah.
Right? Promises only count if you trust that the other person's going to give you what they said they're going to do, right?
Well,
We have some questions over there in the back.
So, okay, so I understand this idea of trust, and I understand in a small scale, small real world physical scale. So I'm gonna trust you because I know you. You're producing tomatoes or whatever. That's the example on the website, and you're gonna trust me. But what about the marketplace, the online part? So let's say I have 1, 2, 3 fake accounts. I'm gonna buy these lovely little mugs with a fake account. How the seller could refuse?
The seller will only get the tokens of people that they trust.
Okay, but then you cannot go on a global online way,
You can
right?
have it modular. So, for example, you can have marketplaces that are just instances of the same thing at a regional levels, so that people can trade locally. We have this issue right now where in the marketplace that I showed you, we have people ordering from the Philippines, and they want to buy the nice mugs and the food and stuff, but unfortunately, the businesses here don't ship internationally. But eventually, we're going to move to a system that is more regional based. Because there's the thing, like, trust and communities are not just geographically bound, they can be internationally bound. And Circles is hyper local, but it's also global. That's the way it's designed. And so you can have local credit networks, whatever, but you can go anywhere in the world where there are people using the same thing, exchanging things, and also participate.
In the interest of time, we will segue from all those trust words into Trust Lines Protocol with
Great.
Andreas Fletcher. Thank you so much, Julio.
Thank you.